In our present, it's Friday, June 11th.
And that means this week's past.
Yo, we are live.
We should be live. We should be audible. Everything should be working.
We should be past. We should be present.
We should be present. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this week's past. A podcast coming live to you straight from Twitch.
Or later via YouTube or via any and all of your favorite podcast platforms.
Exactly. So, whenever you are, wherever you are, past, present, future.
Yeah. Hello, future people.
Hello, future people. Let's talk about some past.
Absolutely. For our main story this week, we will be talking about mining. The mining of texts. We will be talking with Alex Brandsen. We will be talking about text mining. We'll be also talking about the frontiers of digital archaeology, which is represented by yours truly, I guess. And, but maybe before we do that, you get like 30 seconds to introduce yourself. And also the fact you get to tell when your defense date will be. Because you're soon to be a doctor as well, I understand.
True. I wish I already knew my date, but it's not known yet.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm still finalizing the dissertation.
You're in the liminal phase.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting there. But yes, I'm Alex Branson. I'm a researcher at the Faculty of Archaeology here in Leiden. And like I said, almost finished my PhD, currently working on a postdoc. And I work with text mining, digital archaeology, working with archaeological text, making them better searchable. That's the very short story.
And the long story we will get in about, not a minute, but in about 15 minutes.
Great.
And, of course, if you're live with us on Twitch, we would love to hear from you.
Hello, live people.
Put things in the chat. We're going to try to answer them. If you are watching us in the future, put things in the comments on YouTube or on Spotify. You can't put comments on Spotify, so come to YouTube and put the comments there. You will be able to see this on all platforms across the globe.
There were apparently no funky tunes, according to them.
There were no funky tunes?
According to Twitch, that there was no funky tunes.
There was no funky tunes.
I heard funky tunes, so I don't know what happened.
What happened. It did not automatically.
We were just jiving in our brains.
Yeah, we're gonna edit it over. Don't worry.
Absolutely. For the future people, they will have funky tunes.
Exactly.
They will have funky tunes. Mic 3 is soft. So, by the way, if you're now with us, you're hearing like, what are you talking about? Mic 3 funky tunes. We all hear that. That's because you're in the future and there's some editing going on. But we're doing the rest of this live.
Everything's happening live.
We get some live feedback from Twitch. But what we're going to be doing live now as well is share the news of the week. Do you've got live tunes for us now?
Damn.
Yeah. Boom. All right, take it away, Aris.
There we go. So, for our first news item this week, we have a very interesting...
That's very interesting.
I find it very interesting. For me, it's extremely interesting. A very interesting find. It was actually discovered a while ago, 2006, but it was published just now. And it is a curious case of a cursed chicken.
An ancient Athenian cursed jar.
Exactly.
Oh, you need to Aris the mic a bit more, which basically means you need to love it a bit more closely. You need to just eat it up a little bit more, so you get to just exactly, just pop it into your face as much as possible. Yeah, exactly.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. Just in your case, you also have to maybe lean into a little bit.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's turning into an ASMR video.
Yeah.
So, so it was published in the journal Hesperia by Jessica Lamont. This find that was excavated in the Athenian Agora. And it was actually a small ceramic pot, and it was in sort of a commercial building, in an industrial building. It was tucked in the
you mean
corner.
An ancient commercial building?
Ancient commercial building in the Athenian Agora, was this place that merchants would sell their things, and Also, it was the place where people would come in to vote and so on. So there were a lot of shops there. There were a lot of people coming in and out. A lot of social interaction happening.
Also of the sorcerer's kind.
Clearly, also
sorcerer's
of the
infections.
Yeah, exactly. Because what they found there is this vessel that was inscribed with 13 names on it. Many of them were female. Many of them were actually unattested before in Attica. And there was this a sacrificed chicken inside the pot. And there was a curse associated with this. Basically, a curse...
F for the chicken, by the way.
F for the chicken, poor chicken. But the whole idea was that this was this like ritual assemblage.
It was ritual.
It was ritual.
It was
because we don't
ritual.
know. Yeah.
Not somebody hating on a chicken. No, this was ritual.
This was ritual. According to the abstract, it says the ritual assemblage belongs to the realm of Athenian binding curses and aimed to bind or inhibit the physical and cognitive faculties of the named individuals. This unique discovery offers new evidence for the practice of magic in the heart of ancient Athens.
In the heart of ancient Athens.
What do you think about this, Angus?
Well, I don't think much about it except for the fact that I'm absolutely, amazed by such a find. So one of the things that I would wonder about, was this a recent archaeological excavation, or was this something that was already in the museum? So were they recently excavating on the Agora then? That's one question of detail that I have for you. Secondly, I never knew that this was like a Greek or Athenian practice in this particular way. I know from the Roman museum in Bath, I know these little lead rolls that they would throw in the well, and there would also be all sorts of curses and well wishes on it. And I know that from Egypt, I think, as well. I mean, cursing is, something for all ages, I guess. Yeah. Not only the F words and stuff like that, but also actually cursing people and wishing them unwell. Yeah. So I think it's just it's not a nice find in a way, but it's a very human find.
It is a very human find, yeah. And it's not that it was necessarily uncommon. It is like this kind of... First of all, it was excavated as said 2006. So... excavations in the Athenian Agora happen still from different schools as well. Mostly maintenance work, but also some actual excavations. But it was a 15 years find, basically. But it's not what struck me as very interesting. Yeah, we have a lot of later these kind of curses. But we also, specifically when it comes to chickens, we know that the Athenians would use chickens in other kind of rites. So, for example, in foundation rites for their houses, they would often sacrifice a chicken, put it in a pot, and put it at the entrance of their house, bury it at the entrance of the house, and stuff like that. Yeah. What do you make of this, Alex?
Well, I think it's very fascinating, but personally, I think we should leave all these cursed items alone.
Yeah.
I think it was back in 2019 we had the black sarcophagus with the mummy juice in it, and the internet wanted to drink it.
Yeah.
Well, just after that we had Corona. So all I'm saying is let's just leave these cursed items alone. I mean, it's dangerous to mess with that kind of stuff.
Some clear causation, we don't know. But
exactly. We don't necessarily know, but there's correlation there. And, we can laugh a little bit about it, but at the same time, there are definitely archaeologists out there that for this specific reason, it's like, why mess with the things that you don't really know, right? Would not mess with this. So maybe there's a bit of wisdom to it. At the same time, because it's such a human thing, it's also nice to find out about how people used to handle this sorts of stuff. Now we dox people or do other horrible stuff to them. We used to do horrible stuff to chickens in order to do horrible stuff to people, I guess.
Yeah. Well, but I find it, for me, it's actually it's one of these very interesting things. I've taught for some time the archaeology of ritual and religion.
And cursing, that's also in the evenings, that's your evening class, right?
Yeah, definitely. Some stream cursing as well sometimes, it happens. But from, as you said, from a very human point of view, it's extremely interesting. And we have this kind of curses in the area of my expertise, in the Near East. It's very common to see this kind of curses in tombs or in relation to buildings that kings would want other people to maintain them and so on. But it does have a very human aspect, and I think it's very interesting how it comes out in the lower people's lives in a way from how archaeologists understand it. Because we see it in association with kings, especially in the East, but it's not as common to see the presence of magic or the presence of this kind of rituals in the day-to-day life, which I find extremely fascinating.
I just want to know what happened to these people, though, with the names on the pot.
I guess we will never know.
We will unfortunately never know that.
So, this was our first newsbit item, and I will hand it out to Angus.
All right. We're going to go far away now from Athenian shores. And we're going to leave Europe, I think, for the very first time in one of our news bits. Because a new study co-authored by University of Central Florida researchers show that pre-Columbian people of a culturally diverse, and I'm reading from the phys.org abstract right now, culturally diverse but not well-documented area of the Amazon in South America significantly altered their landscape thousands of years earlier than previously thought. So let's unpack this a little bit. In this news item, which came from phys.org, but is actually based on proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences article by this group of researchers from the University of Central Florida, as well as the University of Northumbria in the UK. They went to this, not necessarily remote, but they went to this particular part of the Amazon that the Llanos de Mojas, if I remember correctly, because I didn't write this down. So if this is wrong, sorry for that, but some form of llanos, which is a type of it's a type of plain, often a floodplain, very sort of an environment that's basically subject to a lot of flooding, but also very forested. And it's fascinating to me because it's just one other step in a long line of evidence that the Amazon is very much a cultural landscape. So the way that they particularly showed this in this case, there's all sorts of archaeological traces that you can find in the Amazon dating back to thousands of years. This one dated to 3,500 years ago, so somewhere around, if I remember correctly, 1200 BCE. They did this with sediment cores. So they cored into this particular llanos, so the part of this llanos, and they found in that sediment core, they found phytoliths, which are these super hard, we don't see them as human beings, right? And we don't really know about them, but plants have super hard little bits of silica in it, and they preserve very well, and they also can generally be used to identify different type of plant species. So maize and squash was identified at this very early stage, 3,500 BC, as well as, and this is where I learned something new from this article, as well as in this particular sediment core, there was charcoal, that's not new for me, diatoms, I don't know even if I pronounce this correctly, single cell algae with a cell wand also made of silica, so also basically sort of preserving very well and also showing the indication of different water levels. So basically they know people were active and actually not necessarily mucking about, but altering their landscapes back then. So, so what are your thoughts about that?
I'm passing it on to you.
Oh, right.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that's definitely very interesting. I mean, we do have evidence from a long time ago, people altering the landscape, but sometimes it's really hard to actually pinpoint it. I think this kind of research where you can actually, get some hard evidence is very fascinating, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I especially find this concept of landscape altering and how we approach it from a modern point of view, and how we really have to shift our the way that we think about landscape to understand what it means to change the landscape for this kind of people. There is actually a very interesting illustration of this. Yeah. So let's hope this works out. And if you're watching this on YouTube or on Twitch live, you get to see it. And if not, then you don't. I guess it doesn't want to work for me. Because why would it, But I am going to make it work.
You're going to make it work.
I'm going to make it work.
Well, while you make it work, maybe I'll tell something a little bit about this. This illustration,
beautiful illustration
that we're seeing, which was made by Catherine Kalecki, an artist hired specifically for this. What it just shows is this flooded area, these floodplains, these llanos, with forested hill areas, and very importantly also, gardens and all sorts of things that were landscaped. So this is, I think, a very nice. And just looking at it, we know these sorts of reconstructions from the Netherlands and from other places, in prehistory, but we don't really identify it with, the Amazon, which is this dense tropical forest. Yeah. And, it is, but wasn't always in those particular ways. And even if it's a dense tropical forest, doesn't mean that humans haven't altered it. And that is exactly what you're getting at, this idea of landscape. Exactly. And that landscape is in flux, or that landscape is not even only in flux, but there's this very old, very Western idea, right, between nature and culture. And, for many of us in this world, if you say, what is one of the most natural environments in the world? Well, many of people will say the Amazon, right? Now, Bolsonaro is destroying one of our last natural refuges in the world. But that's one way to look at it, and absolutely that's happening. But it's not only a natural landscape, it is very much a cultural ecology. That's a term that archaeologists in Amazonia use to talk about this sort of stuff. It's also a bit of an old framework to think about how cultures sort of grow hand in hand together with their environments. But at the core of it, there's something to it. The idea that a landscape, but also the humans living in it, are very much influenced by each other, as I think we're all recognizing in this present as well. So that's what I think is the really real cool part about this. And it's not that this wasn't known yet, but it still hasn't completely infiltrated the popular conscience that the Amazon is actually very much this cultural landscape.
Excellent. Talking about, it's not about cultural landscapes, but it's more about like the things that humans get to do. I'll just pass it on to our next news bit, which has to do with something that I actually really like, and that is phenomenology and sort of experimental archaeology, which is something that I shouldn't be telling to archaeologists because they will definitely not appreciate it. But hey, what can you do?
You've sniffed the phenomenology fairy.
Exactly. So, according to an auditory archaeologist from the Academy of Finland research fellow, sorry if I slaughtered this name, Rita Rainio from the University of Helsinki, they found out that there were a specific kind of pendants that were worn for dancing purposes. So these people would wear these teeth, basically, teeth and bones, and they would use them as rattlers. So they would put them over themselves, very close together, would do specific movements of dancing, and produce sound together with their dancing, which I find it absolutely fascinating. They did, to demonstrate this, they used microanalysis and user analysis that according to...
So this is looking at a microscope.
Exactly.
Very close up to...
Exactly.
Little, so not major breakages or something like that, little marks, right?
Exactly. So they have to look very closely, and by reconstructing how these teeth would be placed next to each other and checking what kind of marks would be left on them, they get to learn that possibly these things were actually used as rattlers. Which for me it's absolutely fascinating. It's the kind of thing that you can very easily reconstruct in a way. Yeah. You can do it yourself and try it out and see what kind of sense
you say very easily, my friend, but I'm also not going to butcher the name, but the researcher here that did this research apparently danced for 6 hours straight with this gear on, which I'm sure wasn't entirely super, well, maybe it was very comfortable. I don't know, that the article doesn't say that. So you say easily, but
probably not too easily. That's true. They
6
were
hours of dancing.
Teeth. And I'm going to bring up, hopefully the browser will agree with me this time around, because I want to show again the reconstruction, the artistic reconstruction, which you can see over here of how this could possibly have looked like.
No browser. Oh, there's browser look. There's browser look.
There's browser. It's working.
Another amazing reconstruction drawing, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I really love this kind of reconstructions. What can I say?
Alex, have you ever danced for 6 hours straight?
Certainly, but not wearing bones or anything like that. No. Been to a couple of festivals where I've definitely been dancing for 6 hours straight. Yeah.
It's been a while for me. I will say so. I will say that. And that sort of made me jealous of thinking of this person way back when who was just dancing their asses off while we're still not entirely allowed. Well, actually, we're allowed to dance because we could always dance, but at least not go to clubs and stuff. I mean, now the music venues have opened again, so maybe sometime soon. Yeah.
No, interesting stuff. I just find anything that has to do with the archaeology of the senses particularly interesting, because this kind of thing that archaeologists tend to forget sometimes or overlook, or not, because senses don't leave. They don't leave material traces always. And this is a case where we do get to see material evidence of something that would do something with the senses, or that would do something.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think is absolutely fascinating about the type of archaeological research that we see. And I'm gonna say that we're seeing more of this. I mean, it could also be that I'm just old and nostalgic for being an archaeologist myself. But what we're seeing is a lot more of those lab type, or basically these data-driven experiments like this, but also like the previous one we just discussed, or the previous two we even discussed. Yeah. And that really managed to make this social, cultural connection. And that was, I think, lacking for a long time in archaeology. We were talking about, oh yes, we know that people did this in the past, and we were talking about methods to get to that, but often it sort of got stuck in talking about methods or talking about what people did in the past. And you really see with studies like this that they really nicely just bring this together. And that's, for me, that's the type of most exciting archaeological research. Whether it's phenomenology or not, which is not phenomenology, this is dancing your ass offology.
Which I can definitely subscribe to this kind of thing. So because we are running slightly a bit over time, we'll speed through the next news bit because I really want to bring it up.
We will speed run Overboard, right?
Wait. Tell me what's Overboard.
Overboard is this shadow drop game by Inkle. Not Archaeology this, but a very cool game. Inkle is also a very cool developer, Inkle Studios. It is the studios behind great titles like 80 Days,
Heaven's Vault,
the archaeology
game, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Bunch of other great games. Pendragon, another one, or Game of the Year last year. But they shadow dropped this game, and they were able to shadow drop this game because they have this very cool interactive narrative engine called Ink, or that's the script, and then they've got a whole engine around it. That they were able to sort of prototype this and really make this very, very quickly. So what the game is about, also very important, you're on this ship. I'm not going to say too much about it, but I guess this will be a spoiler for the very first couple of seconds. You're on a ship with your husband, but your husband, by your hand, gets a bit of an accident, thrown overboard.
As it happens.
So it's a reverse murder mystery. So you have to, there's a couple of hours before the ship gets to port, and before those hours are done, you have to either, make sure that you are not caught, or it's basically after that this opens completely up within the space of the ship, set in the 1920s, if I recall correctly. Anyway, it has this very nice historical setting to it. Yeah. Absolutely. Did you play it?
I have not played it yet. But,
did you play it?
I did not play it. No, I had a look at it. It definitely sounded like something I'd like to play. I recently got into the whole murder mystery party thing during the Corona time, so give it a go.
You're gonna love this, and
absolutely.
These are some really great authors as well. So this game, it just really clicks. It's not very expensive at all. So if you're into murder mysteries, stuck without a murderous party to play murder mysteries with, I would say go for this one for a night or even many nights, because you can replay this quite a couple of times.
And with that, we're going to pass it on to the main segment for this week. Bam. Bam. For our main segment today, as we've said, we have a very special guest, Alex Branson, soon to be doctor. So tell us, who is Alex Branson and what is your research about?
Yeah, so I studied archaeology, did my bachelor here in Leiden back in 2008, I think I graduated.
Eat that mic though.
It was a while ago. And I always liked computers in general. And when I was studying archaeology, I just realized the overlap between computers and archaeology was really something I was interested in. Back then, there wasn't really any computational archaeology master in the Netherlands, so I moved to York in England for a while to do my master's there in archaeological information systems. And after that, basically, we had the economic crisis of 2008, so there was no jobs whatsoever in archaeology, especially in England, which meant I ended up doing web development for a while. So I was making websites for clients, basically, till I think 2017, when a PhD position opened here in Leiden, basically on that intersection between computers and archaeology, looking at text mining in archaeology. So specifically what I've been doing in my PhD is we have this problem that there's a lot of excavation reports. So we've got thousands of them. I think at the moment we're up up to 80, 90,000 in the Netherlands. And there's a couple thousand being added every year. And actually finding the information that you need from these reports is at the moment quite difficult. You can search on the description and the title maybe, but actually searching on concepts in the text is impossible. So we wanted to see if we can fix that, make it easier for other archaeologists to search through this data and do better research. So what I'm doing is using text mining and machine learning. Won't go into too much detail here because we've got 15 minutes, to make an intelligent search engine. And so basically what it does, if you type in, I want everything from the Middle Ages, then it will also find stuff where it says Merovingian or 1500 AD or whatever kind of...
Or mistyped the Middle Ages or medieval times or, exactly.
Yeah. Carbon C14 datings, all sorts of stuff. And it's these problems of synonyms that are quite often difficult to be able to find the stuff you're looking for. And to automatically do that, we use I use some machine learning to automatically find these concepts and distinguish between them. And so this search engine is called Agnes. And it's
not named after me.
No, almost. Agnes, not Angus, we've done some evaluations with actual archaeologists to see what they think of it, and so far it's all going very well. Yeah,
you say some machine learning, but you don't ever want to blow your own horn or research, but you're kind of at the forefront of machine learning, especially when you started in 2017. Now it's something that I guess we talked about machine learning 2 weeks ago as a news item.
And we can bring it up now and ask your expertise opinion.
Go for it. You bring it up because you have the details there.
Yeah. So what we did last week in our news coverage, there was this paper that two digital archaeologists created this AI that basically would recognize pottery typology, and whether it is actually possible to recognize pottery typology. And they claimed that it was 4 times quicker than an expert archaeologist to recognize from a picture.
4 archaeologists professionally sorting.
4 professional archaeologists
couldn't
beat
at
it,
all.
basically.
Also not even in terms of, some of them not even in terms of being right.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So we had a bit of a discussion about this, and since you've been doing a lot of machine learning, you know your stuff about AI and archaeology as well. So we really wanted your expertise opinion on this.
And just generally on the state of machine learning, and I sort of want to zoom out beyond machine learning, artificial intelligence in archaeology, because you've also organized a couple of sessions about this sort of stuff. So you're the person to ask. Will archaeologists be machines in 5 years?
For some tasks, hopefully yes.
Yes.
That's my personal view. But coming back to the pottery first, I think it is possible for AI to use what's it called, computer vision to recognize certain things. Computers are already really good at seeing the difference between cats and dogs, or even different types of cats.
They're better than us when we ask one of these CAPTCHA thingies, identify probably plenty of machine learning programs or computer vision programs can do it better, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Funny side story about the CAPTCHAs, they tend to actually be training material for the machine learning. Yeah. When you fill them in, you're providing Google with
a lot of important information.
We're feeding the Google brain, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've seen actually successful examples of people doing this. Also on coins, for example, automatically figuring out what emperor is on the coin, that kind of stuff. So it's happening, and it's almost always quicker than a human, because these neural networks normally take less than a second, sometimes a couple of milliseconds to actually relatively successfully classify these items. Yeah. There are some caveats, though. Most of the time, these systems need very clear pictures, very standardized pictures, all from the same angle, all of the same kind of scale and everything. So it's not like you could just hold up your phone and you found a shard and be like, oh yeah, that's a pink sword type B. There's some preparation. There's still some human element involved.
Yeah, some good lab photos, regular lighting, same angles, etc.
Exactly. That makes it easier for the AI. Especially I think where it can be very useful is if obviously the professionals, the professors, they can automatically see, in a second this is this particular type of pottery. But for example, students in the field, if they're still learning, they find something, they could just use an app to see, oh, this is this type with 80% certainty. That's super useful to learn yourself. What are the characteristics of these types of pottery, for example? So yeah, it won't replace the experts. We still need experts actually provide the training data. But for teaching for students, for bringing knowledge to places where there are no professors, it's
that's a
super,
very good
super
point.
useful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's not always professors around everywhere, and
Exactly.
it is nice at least to have their stand-in there, right? So one of the things that I think is very fascinating about your research, it isn't, technically speaking, the type of stuff that archaeologists, I mean, it's what they do, because, they also work with texts, looking up information. It's part of archaeology too. It's just not the type of archaeology where you dig or identify pottery. But this is not something that is, something that's often it's just not learned to students, for example. And it's something that is still a super specific job, right? So this is also not something that I think I know very much less about AI than you do. This is not something that you can just have a general AI, well, not a general AI because we don't have those yet, but basically some sort of a generally trained model do, right? Because the general trained model trains on Reddit or whatever, and they don't really talk that much about Merovingian pottery or whatever, right? So yours is a very specialized, case in this case. So how does that change the way that you work then with one of these models, basically?
That's very good. Well, it's a problem. It's a very good point. I think one of the examples is I use a type of deep learning model called BERT, which is a very deep language model that basically you just throw a couple of gigabytes or terabytes of text into it, and it will learn basically language or grammar. And it can use that knowledge to then predict where words are and also predict classes of words or classes of documents in a nutshell. So basically Google, one of the big giants in AI, made their own BERT model, but they made it multilingual. So it does 114 languages in one, which is great for a search engine because they deal with all of these languages. But on Dutch text, it doesn't work very well. So I think at an accuracy of 70%-ish. No, lower actually, 65-ish. And then I was trying to figure out, should I make my own Dutch model? Because it's possible. You just need to find a lot of Dutch information, Dutch text. So then I found that somebody else was working on this. Use that model, and indeed we see an increase. It's something like 72%. But then that was trained on Wikipedia, that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, maybe an archaeology BERT would be even better. So one of these models trained on archaeological text. So that's what I did, and then let I think like 4 GPUs run for something like 6 days because it takes forever to train these models.
Yeah.
And this model specifically trained on Dutch archaeology performed even better, something up to 78% accuracy. So would you see that this is such a niche case that we need to develop our own tools to be able to do this? You can take off-the-shelf stuff, but you're going to have to adapt it at the very least, or train your own models.
But all of this stuff that you're talking about are, of course, they are all amazing. You know, my fascination with digital archaeology. But for the skeptics out there, because there are people who will question this, and even when we're reading that other article about the pottery, there were people who were like, yes, but no, because the human eye and whatnot, they have their own argumentation. But we also speak sometimes, and you're always doing a little bit of coding, a lot of coding, not always very much digging, not always very much like fine processing. For example, things that people would immediately connect with archaeology. So there will be people who will say, there's not much actual archaeology left in the digital archaeology. There's not much, it's basically coding and training tools to do the job for us. So what would be your take on this? Is there archaeology left in the digital archaeology? Or do you think that a lot of things will get out of there slowly?
That's a very good point. And I think a lot of people are actually writing quite actively about what is digital archaeology, what is our role in it, or how much is digital, how much is archaeology. I think in my case, what I'm actually doing is coding. It's just straight up computer science, really. So I've not touched a trowel or or like dig in the ground for 10 years or something. But, and this is a big but, is that in previous projects, we keep seeing that when archaeologists with no computer knowledge hire computer scientists to do an archaeological type job, they tend to mess it up because they don't understand the intricacies of archaeology and also the vagueness of archaeology. A lot of computer scientists are it's 1 or 0, but in archaeologists they tend to be like, oh, it's 0.8, it's somewhere in the middle, or there's a gray area. Yeah. So I think what we need is digital archaeologists that might not be extremely good computer scientists or extremely good archaeologists, but that can be that person in the middle. So they translate between the computer science and the archaeology, know the pitfalls of both, to combine them in a way that we can actually do useful stuff for archaeologists. But that being said, I call myself a digital archaeologist, but it's more digital than archaeology. 100%.
Yeah, but as you said, it's still very important to have these people who can actually speak both languages and be able to translate these kind of things. One other thing you're doing, maybe on your offside, but I really want you to talk about this, is you're doing a lot of 3D printing. And you're doing also a lot of historical 3D printing and having a lot of fun with it. So talk to me a little bit about your experience with 3D printing and the kind of stuff that you're making. And trebuchets in particular.
And trebuchets in particular.
Definitely. That's always the thing, So I started 3D printing like a year ago or something. I've wanted one since they first came on the market, I think like 2000s-ish. They were like available commercially for normal people. But they're always like tens of thousands of euros, so I never really bothered. Yeah. But then I found out like a couple of years ago, they're only 180, 200 euros now. So I was like, okay, I can afford that on my PhD wage. I just bought one and thought, let's just print some stuff, see what happens. And a lot of stuff I've been printing is for hobbies. Like I do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, like miniatures and stuff, or dice towers.
I have an excellent dice tower, hand printed. Well, not hand printed, I guess, but printed by you. That not only I love, but Hannah, my daughter, absolutely loves as well. So when we play test D&D, because we don't really play actual D&D yet, we use that dice tower. She's like, yeah, let's take it out, and I'm not allowed to touch it because it's kind of hers now apparently. But absolutely. Doesn't only have to be functional stuff; it can absolutely be playful stuff. And a dice tower is as functional.
It's also functional.
It is absolutely functional. Absolutely functional.
And then just as a joke, I once started joking about trebuchets, and I really like them. But then I figured out, well, I could probably print one, so I've been testing a lot, like trying to print different types of trebuchets, and adjusting them to make sure they get the maximum reach for the weight and stuff. It's getting into physics now, but it's quite interesting.
What material do you use for printing your trebuchets in particular? Because one of the things I know very little about 3D printing. We have an Ultimaker lying around somewhere in our passive play lab, and unfortunately haven't been able to play around with it as much as I want. But one of the things that I was absolutely baffled by when I first started getting the amount of different types of materials, not only colors, but like literally structural properties. So what, for those 3D printing geeks out there, what is the right structural material for a trebuchet?
So really, weirdly enough, trebuchets are quite sturdy. I mean, their dimensions are often based on wood, and the standard plastic, PLA, is a biodegradable plastic, actually has more strength than wood in general. So most standard models of a trebuchet you can remake in PLA, and it will be sturdy enough. And one of the advantages, it is biodegradable. Kind of, you do need to heat it up to 60 degrees or something. And it's super easy to print with, so you don't need high temperatures, you don't need an enclosure, so it just makes everything a lot easier. Just the standard PLA, it's good enough for the trebuchets.
All right, good to know.
Yeah.
Excellent. And with that, I'll skip one of the questions in the interest of time, and I will pass us on to the next section, the past of the pops. Bam.
And as always, because this is the second time we're doing this.
As always, twice.
We end our podcast with Past of the Pops, where we present our present-day media that is somehow entangled with the past. So, what do you have an offer for us this week, my friend?
I have my latest hobby.
Your latest hobby.
I have a lot of hobbies. One of them is cooking. And every now and then, I get hooked into a specific kind of cuisine. And then, like, I've done Italian, I've done Asian, I've done
You also do Greek
I've-
food, I
do
understand.
Greek because I am from Greece. So I try to branch out and learn different things. So for my birthday, my girlfriend bought me a book by a guy called George Motz, also known as the Burger Scholar. And what he does is he travels across America into all of these like historical burger places, and he studies the history of burger, of original American burger. So he goes into this like very small towns. You find this burgers restaurant that is like 100 years old, and asks them, "Hey, how do you make this burger? What are you doing? What are the tools that you're using?" And I've been hooked on this guy's videos. I'm like, he's been doing so many things. So my girlfriend bought me his recipe book for my birthday, and now I'm hooked on making historically correct burgers from around the US. So I've been...
Are they historically correct or are they authentic burgers?
It depends, because sometimes need to make them authentic because you don't have the tools, and sometimes they are correct because you have the tools. So, for example, you really need a big, thick, like spatula to smash them and make these nice smash burgers. Very little condiments, weird things that you never expected, but there was this Italian person in this region of the US that thought, hey, let's do this crazy thing on a burger, right? And then you have these burgers that you never know where they're coming from. So basically, I'm following the history of the burger through YouTube videos and a book, and trying to make these historical burgers myself and see how they are.
He found the Dutch cuisine, says Omar.
Yeah. I've cooked Dutch food, sukadelope a lot of times. Very nice. I found I've been browsing around, and there was this granny recipe on how to make with tons of butter. That is my big Dutch plate. I've done some other Dutch stuff, not that much. So because no bad blood here, but there's not that much.
What critical note that I think Alex will agree on me with as well is that we also all need to consume a lot less meat, or maybe stop eating meat altogether.
That is,
and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be enjoying these particular burger recipes because you're you, but one of the things that is fascinating about this is, of course, that this burger has now become cultural heritage.
Yes, exactly.
And I can already see the Americans, after they've already died in a ditch because somebody tried to take their guns, they were going to die in a ditch a second time because somebody tried to take their burgers.
But here is the thing. One of the interesting things that I've found because of this is that a lot of these burgers, because there were some early burgers, early 20th century.
Early burgers, yes.
But
how would your bird model work with that? Early burgers.
Early burgers. But during World War II, for example, or during the recession or after World War II, when there was food shortages and they had to cook with less meat, they found out all sorts of innovative ways to cook same amounts of burgers with significantly less meat. So you get like this burger bun, these burgers that have like holes in them, and then they made it a pattern, and now it's like a thing for this burger chain to have holes in it. Or there is only one vegan recipe in there, because that guy is like, I'm not gonna make vegan burgers, but he makes one which I've made before, and it's actually amazing. It is, oh my god, how do you call them? With beetroots.
Beetroot burger.
You make beetroot burgers. Amazing. I've made beetroot burgers several times. I love them. Well, I love beetroots in general. Beetroot burgers are amazing.
Great vegetable.
Yeah. And with that, Angus, what do you have for us today?
All right, what I have for us today is, this is going to be a bit mega nerdy, maybe not for everybody, but
burger history is not nerdy.
Yeah, okay, maybe you're right. We're already in nerd territory here. So solo RPGs, so role-playing games. Tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons is the most famous one, Pathfinder, etc. It doesn't really matter. But then just for yourself. And I've become quite fascinated with them over the last 1-2 years, I think. I've got a couple of them with them here because I'm particularly interested in the ones. Let's see how the camera handles this. There you go. This is a very this is my newest copy.
1,000-year-old vampire.
1,000-year-old vampire, and here we have another absolute 1,000-year-old vampire by Tim Hutchings, by the way. We we have another stellar solo RPG that you and I actually not played solo, but played together.
We played
can
on
also do
stream,
that.
yeah.
Artifact, where you are an artifact. And you have to what? It's like
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
You are an artifact.
You are
You are
an
in fact a magical item, so you're an intelligent item in the ideas of D&D, and you sort of go through the series of owners rather than the other way around, right? So pretty neat. And there's Small Town Skeleton, which is actually not a solo RPG, but it's solo RPG-ish. Here another very nice Delve, a solo map drawing game.
Oh wow!
So I'm pretty deeply into solo RPGs, particularly that have something to do with archaeology. So I'm never ever gonna get Haley to play an RPG with me. Just not happening. I'm also not gonna get. So I have cool friends who play RPGs, but I can only get them to play so many of my boutique choices. So I kind of need to go for the solo RPG experience, and I'm particularly interested in the ones that take you through time. So this one, which is absolutely just a 1,000-year-old vampire, is quite literally about being a 1,000-year-old vampire, and you're gonna experience all sorts of historical events, right, through time.
Nice.
And you're gonna chronicle that in your diaries, and you're gonna have experiences which will become your memories,
Oh, sick.
which end up becoming. Well, you end up forgetting them, or they get to be part of your diary. That's the basic core of the game, and it's just I haven't played this yet, but I've definitely enjoyed the rules. You get to use EM dashes in it. And I'm just geeking out about this sort of stuff because they really allow you to have this one-on-one creative relation with thinking about time and space in a very archaeological perspective, or at least historical time perspective.
Excellent, excellent. And Alex, what have you brought for us today?
Yeah, so Mr. Archaeologists probably expect something very old, but actually it's not that old. So it's a series called Carnival. And it's set to the United States Dust Bowl in like the 1920s, 1930s, I believe. And I think actually it's one of the best series I've ever seen. It's absolutely incredible. But yeah, so it's set during the Great Depression, and it tracks a traveling carnival. And it's not just any carnival. These people actually have magic powers. So there's an actual fortune teller. There's a guy with lizard skin, Siamese twins, that kind of stuff. Yeah, and then the main character joins this carnival. Travels around like this area of the United States, and at the same time there's a separate storyline of a priest getting magical powers and using it to grow his church and make a lot of money, grow it even further, etc. And these two storylines at the end converge together and into a massive battle between good and evil. And it starts off quite where you think, okay, this is a bit slow, it's all a bit gritty, but then, yeah, the suspense and the build-up to that second season where it all converges is just absolutely magnificent. And the good thing about it is that it's very authentic. So they've done a lot of research in like old magazines to get the right kind of props and the right kind of setting, right kind of atmosphere, so they're constantly blowing dust over the set and stuff. And it really gives a really good view of the bleak outlook of that time. So there's just poverty everywhere, everybody's scraping by, doing things they don't want to do for money. And it's from a historical point of view, I think very interesting also. And then separately, there's also loads of mythology going on. So there's classic themes of Christianity, Knights Templar going on, there's even a reference to the first atomic bomb test. So it's maybe a lot of people might say it's convoluted. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's all very vague, but I think it's absolutely worth watching. Yeah,
it's quite an old series already in that sense. HBO, right?
Yeah, HBO 2004-ish, I believe.
Yeah, but absolutely. I think it's also very presentist in the sense that there's a good analogy between, because it was before the other Great Depression, right?
Yeah.
That we all, you were talking about that just earlier, actually. So it's still very presentist as well. And I used to remember as well, I mean, maybe if I would watch it now, that it was also very open in the sense about this carnival is, they're all human characters, right? They all have their, they're also being treated as they would have been in that time as well, like, circus freaks, quote unquote.
Casts.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's wonderfully acted as well. So second that recommendation.
Nice.
And with that, well, first of all, Alex, thank you very much for being here with us. If people want to reach out to you, hear about your research, or just check out the stuff that you're doing, where can they find you?
Well, I think if you just Google Alex Branson, you will find my university page and email and everything. I'm also on Twitter, Alex_Branson, or basically any other social media you can think of. So yeah,
you'll find him.
You will find him. Excellent. And with that being said, bam. This was this week's past.
We will be back before you know it with more past goodness on streamingthepast.com.
In the meantime, don't forget to catch all the awesome Let's Plays that are happening every Wednesday, Thursday and Friday from our amazing streamers. Also Tuesday nights and Thursday nights.
Yes, and to those with us on Twitch, hello present people. Thank you for being present.
And also to those who are joining us later on YouTube or on Spotify or on Google or on Apple or anywhere you're listening to this, thank you so much.
And thanks to all the past people who made this present possible too.
Because whenever you are and whenever you are, stay happy
and stay healthy.
Bye everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.